So we now have time for some questions. I do have some questions here that I've received in advance, but as a reminder, we've got a microphone here at the front, and we also have a microphone at the back. If anybody wants to have any questions for any of our employers, I think I can start, if that's okay. And I'm just throwing it out. I don't know how whoever wants to jump in. I don't know that everybody has to answer it, but one of the first questions is, how do you think that we can inspire other employers to be champions like you are at this table? That's an easy one, right? Let's start with the easy one.
Okay, I'll start, I guess. I went first. I'll just do the first question. So I'm going to take up my old "we need to expand the business case" piece on this. And this is, I've been very intensely doing this for the last few months, where I've been talking about the business case with basically anyone who will listen or who will put up with me talking to them about it. And I think that we need to be better at communicating. Is that, can everyone hear that? Is that feedback? Or?
Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback.
Can everyone, okay, that's, oh, no. Oh, you know what? Hold it, it's not as bad. Okay, I'll stop trying to re-engineer this. Maybe I'll just do it. Anyway, we have been using the same business case that's based on a couple different, there's some amazing business cases, by the way, out there. This is not me arguing there isn't one. I want to make that really clear because sometimes I don't come across that way. I think that the business case, just like anything for one kind of business, is going to be different for another. The business case for hiring people with disabilities is going to be different in different kinds of environments, especially what I call a B2B environment. So B2B is a company like Deloitte, but it's a huge part of our market. It's businesses that do work with other businesses. And when you start talking about the clients, you know, you want to attract a certain client, you know, women, LGBT, people with disabilities. It's a different conversation when your clients are banks and other companies. It's not to say that these aren't relevant conversations to have, but these are the kinds of things that we have to be more aware of. Talking about turnover as an example, works with certain kinds of, certain levels in the organization. It's not going to work if you're trying to hire lawyers and management consultants. Not that turnover isn't a problem, but it's different. You don't hire someone because you think they're not going to leave. That's not an incentive. I think if we're going to start to encourage other businesses, we need to start understanding that all businesses are different. And the focus, I'm noticing now, the focus is the business case is irrefutable. It's there. So if there's any problem, you're the problem. And that's not a way to encourage businesses to do anything. I think that it's about, let's maybe be brave enough to step back a bit and either redefine, reevaluate, or at least learn new ways to communicate the business case that resonate with different kinds of businesses.
Does anybody else?
I'll add to that.
Yeah,
just to expand beyond the business case, for my workplace, you know, my colleagues are very well aware of the business case, but the first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, but aviation is different, yeah, but, and then you end up getting some of those roadblocks. So I think the best thing to do is just to start with small successes and just do little case studies and little examples of how it works. You know, I'm a member of the leadership team. I live with a disability. I've been quite successful in my career, and I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm pretty excited to be able to share that with other people. Mm-hmm. And bringing people in like Madison really shows that it can be done. If aviation is historically a very rigid, structured environment, it's very difficult for different levels of function to be imagined to be successful, and here we are trying it and giving it a shot.
So, and I want to be clear, I think, well, the personal stories are amazing as a way to, but when you hear the yeah, but, that's because the business case hasn't been communicated effectively. And I think we're too quick to if someone's sort of pushing back, it's their problem. I think we need to learn how to communicate it better. And when people are pushing, if this business case were as clearly communicated as we think it is, we wouldn't, business is business. Business does the right thing for business. So there are obviously blocks to how this is being communicated. Again, I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it's not being communicated communicate as well. I think individual stories is an incredible way to do it. So anyway, that's just my response back to that.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'd like to respond because Vincent threw down the gauntlet, so. So now I have another story that I can share with a business that's come to me looking for answers with regards to the aviation industry. It's a challenging industry, so just talking about it facilitates that progress where we are all working together on resolving this challenge. The reason why I make the statement with regards to the business case is I agree with Lenore in that it's multifaceted. There's many dimensions to that story. I'm challenged with it being the statement that's put forward first. I'm in business to hire talent, period. So when I'm looking for talent, I'm going to talk in that talent language. My challenge personally, and you've heard my story is different. I've worked in this space for a long time in technology, facilitating the removal of barriers to success for individuals, any individual. I maximize the potential of opportunity and the person on a continuous basis. So my challenge when I'm looking for talent is talent comes first. Nothing else matters. And that's what I mean about that statement being not the one that I lead with, the one that's what I consider to set aside. The business case does not lie. Vincent's numbers are truly compelling, and I told him already that we're going to have a business conversation. But what my point is that this conversation and the language that we use when we are identifying this opportunity to improve business cannot always come from the perspective of disabilities. It has to first and foremost lead with talent. We are talking about maximizing the potential of a business, and so when we look at that opportunity, we have to use language that is compelling. It is when we add descriptions, titles, silos, that we complicate things and make it more problematic. We're talking about a person, we're talking about the talents of an individual, and how do we access that talent in order for them to succeed and the business to succeed. We all need the tools required to do the job. We complicate that by putting the word accommodation, adjustment, and all of those things to help us fit it into a box. I challenge you that the communication piece and the way that we talk with each other and with all of those that are working on this together, we need to think of a new way to communicate so that we ourselves are not part of the problem. That's what I meant by that statement.
Wonderful. Thank you. Look at that. So we have a question.
Good morning. I'm Gary Malkowski from the Canadian Hearing Society. I have a general question for the panel. How are you motivating employers when there are attitudinal barriers? I'm wondering if you have specific strategies. And I'm wondering how you get the employer's attention. So if you have a list of clients, I'm wondering, how are you garnering the attention of employers?
Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I will.
Vincent, thank you.
So we're focusing on the small group at a time. We have a number of really key ambassadors across the country, and I'm going to focus on my business because I look specifically within the Sodexo world right now. But we have a number of key ambassadors all across the country, and we use those ambassadors in all of the regions across the country in order to work with other operators in the same area in order to promote the success stories of the people we have, focusing on talent, focusing on the business case. So it's been very difficult for us to communicate to everybody all across the country at one time. It's just not been successful. But through working through all of our ambassadors across the country, we've seen a lot more success.
Great. Jamie and then Michael.
So I don't do a sales job. I actually let them experience the talent. So that's why I founded Disabilities Mentoring Day. I introduce business to the talent in the community so that they can see that this is a person with the skills and abilities to do the job, and that's why it's working. It's a real tangible cooperative experience with a shared learning component to it, and it is changing perspectives around the province and now hopefully across the country.
Jazz Aviation, one of the things that we've done that's really interesting, I have a colleague who's responsible for the initiative, and what she did was she invited industry colleagues, so folks from WestJet, Porter, Air Canada, Sky Regional, all the airlines. We invited them to a diversity inclusion conference that we hosted and say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's see if we can change how aviation looks. Because if you pay attention at all to the aviation sector, you'll see that it tends to be Caucasian male dominated. So we want to shift that, and we said, let's talk about it. Let's sit down and figure out how can we revisit how we recruit, how can we revisit how we accommodate, how can we revisit new ways to attract new people to the industry. So it's just about having a conversation in a conference.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody have a question? There's a question in the back and then another one here. Oh, sorry, can you keep your hand up?
You want to grab that mic right there?
Oh, okay. Hi. Can you hear me well? Okay, hi. My name is Young. I'm more than a photographer. I take a good headshot of you, which is going to be uploaded on the website. But I'm also studying PhD at McMaster University. And I actually have 2 questions, or maybe 3 questions, and to the panel. The first question is, the term that you use, business case, I kind of want you to clear out the air, because the way I define business case and the way I understood the business case might be different than anybody else in the room. And I kind of wanted to see how the industry or the panel understand the business case and how you apply it. And the second question is, as a researcher, I'm always kind of wanted to know if you happen to know the employer who actually sets the gold standard in terms of hiring and incorporating persons with disabilities. And what benchmark would you use to kind of measure or set the gold standard, right? Because to me, hiring people with disability is more than just paycheck and a job, because you are becoming a part of society and you actually get more utilities out of being in the labor force. So yeah, so if you could answer those questions, that would be great.
So I'm just going to do a little quick recap then of your question. It's what is the business case and how it's applied to you individually, but also what is the standard? How do you define the standard of a gold standard of talent?
Or like how the employer is, like if you have to pick one employer who sets the bar high, who would that be and what's the reason? Yeah.
So you're asking them.
Yeah. If you have to, I mean,
I just want to clarify, you're asking them who
Deloitte?
they think the best employer is for hiring people with disabilities.
Not
So
among 5 of
I have
you,
a funny
yeah.
feeling you might get 5 answers.
Actually, I'll take a stab at it. So first of all, I'm going to talk to the second question first. There isn't a gold standard in the sense that I think another thing we have to start realizing is when we talk about people with disabilities, that's a huge range, and there are some companies who are gold standards in their own ways. So, we have things that have been done by your firm, done by all the firms at this table. Special Stern has hired as a company full of people with autism. Like there's lots of different cases. Mark Wafer's Tim Hortons, 7 Tim Hortons that for 30 years, I think it was, hired a majority of people with disabilities, and he had the best performing Tim Hortons in Canada. There are some very specific examples like that. So I don't think you can just point to one because the topic is so broad. But in terms of what you're asking specifically, when we say business case, what we mean by that, is that what you're saying? Right. A business case is just simply a short term of meaning. What is the economic impact, and how does it improve your business to do something?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you. Are there other questions over here? Thank you. Thanks.
I had a quick question about, I've heard a lot about recruiting new employees, but I haven't heard anything about current employees that may suffer an injury or an illness on the job or off the job. But I haven't heard anybody talk about any kind of programs or policies in place to keep the employees you have employed after they should be disabled or injured or ill.
Well, I'll speak to that with Jazz Aviation. My entire team is dedicated to helping people with newly acquired disabilities, whether temporary or permanent accommodations. And we deal with, my team, we have 4,500 employees across the country, and we deal with and support about 800 individuals every year who present saying, hey, I'm hitting a speed bump in life, I need your help. Let's make something happen. And whether that's a workplace injury or if it's a non-occupational health concern, I tend to move the language away from disability, and I focus more on the medical issue, more on the, the speed bump, because we all have speed bumps. We all have, little bits of turbulence that we'll encounter. So it's just about helping people get through those moments. So our success rate has been pretty good. If we're looking at business case and so on, one of the things that I know that's really, I'll say brag-worthy for Jazz is we're insured by a large insurer who tells us that the duration of our employee disability timelines tend to be about 40% shorter than the other employers that they insure. So we're getting people back to work sooner following a difficult health issue or an acquired disability. So that's a good example.
Thank you. We have another question. Same table.
Etharaju Ramachandran at the Prevention Link. I know you talk about hiring people with disabilities and all. How do you address for people of color, racially discriminalized people? How do you address that?
So I might just, if you don't mind, can I tweak your question a little bit? And because we really are here for disability and employment, can I tweak it to ask about the intersectionality of hiring people with disabilities that may have, that are also of another priority group, whether it be any type of your diversity. So if it's women, if it's LGBT, if it's color, how does that intersectionality play out in your workplaces? Am I okay to ask that, to morph that question? Thank you. Jamie.
I'll address that. It might be surprising that a small firm can answer that question, but I believe it's in our approach to ensure that there are no barriers to success that I can answer that question, and then I'll base it also on my working with other businesses. I believe that inclusion is just that. And I'm challenged with defining it and putting it into subgroups. Why we do that is the same reason why we do that with anything. It seems more manageable. It seems that you can have focused intent to ensure that you can capture the transition of change and success so you can measure the results. That's why we begin to do things like that. But ensuring that there are no barriers to any success actually has a focus on ensuring that that's the outcome. So when we take from a process all of those things that define the differences and actually look to define the points that have us coming together so that we can be successful, we start to remove the challenges that are focused on that. So by virtue, it happens. We know that every component of the individual pillars, if you will, in diversity have cross-pollination. That's the term that I use. So we know that there are women with disabilities who are also people of color or newcomers to Canada that face 1, 2, 3, 4 barriers at a time. So my focus is ensuring that there are no barriers, and by conclusion, it ensures that we are having that inclusive approach. Businesses that we work with are looking at this from a strategic perspective, and that is where the business case comes in. When you look at being able to represent, meaning serve the clients in the community, to have a product that meets the needs of all, you really must have a diverse approach to solving that or to designing that, because that's the only way that it can meet the needs of all individuals. And that's why they have that particular focus on identifying ways to remove those barriers to people. And I actually think it is what's driving change, because it's necessary. When you look at market share, you're looking at percentages of a finite amount. If you can move that needle even just a little bit, that's when business is going to start to listen.
Thank you. Great. Kathy? Yes, please.
My question to the panel is, would you know of any research or information like this related to how disabled individuals can handle discrimination while job hunting?
Sorry, research research about how they handle, about how people handle
Sorry, can we get the microphone back, just to finish the question?
What I was looking to learn was, is there any research done dealing, which relates to how disabled individuals can handle discrimination while job hunting?
So can I just clarify your question? Are you asking if they, as employers, within their companies, if they've done research on this?
If they know of that, or if they have done it themselves.
Okay.
'Cause
I know that we will have a research panel as part of our conference. Actually, I think it's our next panel. So if you don't have the answer to that, maybe that could be a question for our next panel. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, perfect.
We can talk later.
Talk to Jamie.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, I wanted a question to the panel. We had a lot of questions last night here at our tables and stuff about people with disabilities being employed. Yes, that's great. But what are the chances of them getting promotions within your companies? Have they gone into management or supervisory positions, or do they just stay the same and don't have the opportunity for promotions?
Yeah, I'll make a comment on that. Of all the people who have been tracking over the last 2 years, over 30% of them have been promoted into more senior roles. And we've also seen a big increase in our senior leadership, people being hired into those roles. We focus on it, we measure it, and they've been very, very successful. And I think that's a credit to the work we're doing in order to educate all of our managers and looking at potential and talent and helping people grow.
And I also think that that's why it's so important to not think of this as, what's your program for hiring people with disabilities? It's about, what are your internal programs for removing all barriers so that the barriers don't exist? And what is your program for getting the talent you need for the role you have? That to me is why it's so important, because then you bring someone into an organization because they have the skills and the talent that you need, and they're there. That's also why I struggle a little bit with this. This may not be a popular opinion, so I'm not being very Canadian and polite by saying this. I don't like the business case piece where we say people with disabilities have lower turnover. I find that on some levels it's kind of saying the advantage of hiring a person with disability is they're so grateful to be in this job they won't leave. And it does sound that way. And if you are bringing someone into an organization and saying, Lenore's here, and hey, Lenore is going to stay longer, I don't think that's not even, depending on the job, at any management level or above, that's not a nice thing to say about Lenore, actually. If you say Lenore is never going to leave, the company decides, or I might decide to strategically leave, but it's not out of any sense of I won't leave because I'm so happy to be there. So I think that that's why we need to be brave enough about looking at what are we really trying to say with this business case, and that's why I think it needs to be focused around the needs that are the needs of talent, the needs of top skills, certainly breaking down barriers. It's old-fashioned and been around for a while, but it's still necessary. And those are operational things. We found in our firm that all the training in the world about myths and stigma, you know what really made a big difference? Putting in a cost code for accommodation costs during recruiting, because those are those operational barriers. You're a recruiter with 50 people you're trying to hire, but with this one, you don't know where to charge a very minor cost around recruiting because you had to bring in an ASL interpreter or whatever. Now you remove that and now it doesn't matter, right? Like those are the kinds of operational obstacles I think that we hit. So that's why I think that if you're going to bring people in, as much as you can remove the barriers and be bringing them in for a reason that makes sense and is positive, then you'll start seeing that promotion.
Excellent. Okay, so you've got the speakers list. Okay, so number one with the microphone.
Right here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm Susan Gazarowski with the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council of Canada. It's a question particular to Jamie, actually, about your Disabilities Mentoring Day. And I invite the rest of the panelists as well to let us know how does that program work? And I understand that in 2018 it's becoming a national program, and I'd like a little bit more information on that, and if any of the other panelists have a similar program.
So you may remember me saying that we focused on hiring people with the intent of attracting persons with disabilities because that was our competitive advantage. No one else was doing it. That was then, this is now. In 2011, I had such a database of talented people that I was looking at that I knew I couldn't hire that many people that that really was the impetus to figure out how can I share this talent, because of course all my colleagues were always talking about the problem they were having finding skilled people, and I said, this makes no sense to me. I have skills. So the introduction is literally a process by which we have people register to participate. They fill out some information. That information facilitates the process of a matching algorithm that we've designed that looks at not just the skills that are past, but also does a little bit of leaning towards predictive analysis and what are they capable of and where's their potential, which speaks to the promotion of being able to develop talent within. We match them to a mentor in the workplace who's an individual who volunteers to participate in the day. Sodexo is a great example of what's possible by participating in this program. Not only are they allowing their employees to show off their talent, if you will, and demonstrate what they've achieved in their careers, but they're also facilitating a process where they're accessing talent in each of the communities where they have locations. So the mentoring day itself is a single day of workplace experience. It's a shared learned experience. The two individuals are matched to the degree where we have 94% of our mentees saying it's a good match, 90% of our mentors said this year that it was a good match, and the reason why we think that that is so important is because this is about developing a relationship that may or may not continue past the single mentoring day, but it facilitates a communication piece where there's a shared learned experience. They're learning from each other throughout that day, and I can give you case study after case study of that example. But the reason why it works is because we're facilitating an introduction to two people that probably would never have met. We're providing a real lived experience for those who are seeking more information about the workplace. Many of the barriers are in place because people haven't even seen inside the workspace before. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what it sounds like to be in a meeting or be in an office with open concept or be in a retail outlet where they're customer facing. You know, they might know it all, but they've never had to execute on this. This provides them with this confidence building experience where it's natural. It's organic, and that's why it's so successful. A simple process. We work with a community partner. CCRW has partnered with us in Toronto and other places, and basically they introduce their clients as well as anyone else in the community and community organizations to participate. The registrations come in, we do the matches, and we do the day. It's that simple. The outcomes last year, though it's not focused on employment, and make that very clear, it's not focused on employment, it's focused on matching individuals to learn from each other. But we had 20% employment rate after last year's event.
I just have one comment on that. We participated 2 years ago, and we had 6 mentors. Last year, we had 28 mentors sign up. And from our perspective, it really helps that manager who's being a mentor for the day understand the capabilities and the talents of people coming in that they're spending time with, and it's a really, really good training opportunity for all of our managers. So it's been very well received within Sodexo.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Frank Foligno from the Canadian Association of the Deaf. I'm the president. Thank you very much for your stories. My question for you in relation to the theme, developing a vision and strategy for the future. And so I have a thought. Your stories together is a fabulous campaign. And so do you have any plan to leverage one another and do a national campaign to bring this awareness across Canada? Because each of your stories are fabulous, bringing deaf people and disabilities into the workplace. And I think right now you're the perfect model. Just, you know, talking about the story of the individual who was working for Jazz, who's deaf. I had no idea. And we need to do a better job at sharing those personal stories, because stories is what resonates with Canadians, and then that will encourage workers and employers to be fully inclusive. So across Canada, you know, we need to share that story. We don't do a very good job of it, and that will encourage social change. So
and I have to say, welcome to the first conference on work and disability on a national level. So I think that Frank, your point is well taken, and I think that this is the beginning of some really amazing stuff going on in the future. Does anybody want to have a comment or?
Well, I mean, thank you, Frank. I actually, we go back a few years. I know Frank, so it's nice to see him here. And thank you. But I think that you're right. We do need to tell more stories. I think storytelling is a powerful part of the business case. I know that there in Ontario anyway. Jamie and I are on a panel called the Employers Panel, and our
on it too.
pardon me.
Sodexo's on it
And
too.
Sodexo's on it as well. Sorry, yes. And we're going to be giving advice to the Ontario government around employing more people with disabilities. So that's something, that's a type of, trying to bring businesses together to get the stories, but absolutely at a national level. And one of the advantages of having a few national companies here on this panel are that we have that reach across the country. So yeah, I can see that happening.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Over here?
Yes, hi, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Jenny. My question is, what type of services for accommodations do you have for people with disabilities but with a mental health issue versus the visible disabilities? How do you handle invisible disabilities when it comes to accommodations?
So accommodations for invisible disabilities. Does anybody want to?
Well, I mean, that's a huge part of what we're doing right now is diving into the area of mental health. I'd say it's more than half of what I'm focusing on right now. So most larger firms will have your standard, an employee assistance program. We have HR, we have managers, we're training managers. The way managers and people leaders are being trained are much more along the lines of identifying any potential mental health issues as well as performance issues, trying to pull those apart. But in terms of accommodations, I mean, I'm really trying to move away from that as much as possible. It's when it comes to mental health, if there's a sick leave is required, I feel we do very well in times of crisis, and I think a lot of larger companies do. But the idea is how do you manage that up to the point of crisis so it's not becoming that? And that to me is around what we're trying to do anyway at Deloitte is by putting in place this thing called the Canadian Workplace Psychological Health and Safety Standard in the workplace. It's a long thing. We call it the standard. And by implementing this, what we're going to be doing is looking at where the risks are across the firm. It's not an accommodation per se, but it's about being proactive about saying, is work-life balance a risk? Or do we have offices where there's a potential for harassment or bullying, and starting to look at it in a more proactive way. But from an accommodation standpoint, I feel like it's again, unless it's something that's medical and crisis and necessary, it's more healthy and energizing to look at it in terms of what you need to do your job properly. And that's I hope we start to move away from the word accommodation and towards the word adjustment, which is what I've been hearing lately in the next few years, because that's what it is. It's just giving you the tools you need to do your job properly.
Excellent.
I can speak on that from personal experience. There's two things. So earlier I heard Lenore mention emotion in the workplace. This is not something that was typically part of a business conversation in the past. It's becoming more prevalent. Last year I spoke at an international conference on health and well-being in the workplace. It has become important because, again, this is business, of the cost. It is detrimental to the success of a business to be managing some of the outcomes where we are looking at the challenges with what we would consider to be a mental health concern. And I think that because of that attention, we're starting to build cultures. The whole point of diversity and inclusion is to build a healthier workplace. I often mention that when we're going to work, that's where we live. So that being, that persona, who you are, is becoming more intrinsic and woven into your workday. And therefore the culture that you work in, you want it to be receiving of who you are as that person. And that's why there's some compelling conversations out there that wellness is as much about the mental health as it is about the physical health. And because that conversation has changed, we will begin to slowly change and how we manage people in the workplace. There are now people managers, not managers, when you have the hiring process. In our personal experience, I will tell you, this requires the most consistent and constant communication.
it is as much on the individual to share their needs and their experience as it is on the employer to understand it. And I think that examples and storytelling are really prevalent here and necessary because it has to become where it feels natural and normal to have those conversations. And there's an element of putting it out there in a trusting relationship when you have to have a conversation like that with an employer. I personally have been there in a conversation where I was in a position that I did not necessarily appreciate having to share something personal with someone who was much younger and could not possibly appreciate what I was sharing. I personally have hired an individual who I watched as they shed their discomfort like a skin to be able to tell me a very simple little thing that I immediately took care of. So the more it happens, the better we'll be at it. But it requires a two-way. This is not an onus on the employer to just get there. This is about all of us helping each other get there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have another question. Sure, Kathy. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Beverly McKean with Canadian Injured Workers Alliance. And my first question is for Vincent, and the second one is for all of you. Vincent, you mentioned a benefits and rewards program. Could you share a little bit more about what that means for a person with disabilities within your hire? And then the second question is for all of you. Do you all, as employers, operate with a pay equity system in mind?
Yeah, our benefit and rewards program is an incentive program that we offer for other clients. So it may be your 5-year anniversary awards or things like that. And it's offered throughout North America, and we do it around the world. It's just part of our portfolio of services. The jobs that we have in that environment are very much like a call center, receiving calls, facilitating orders and things like that. From a payment equity perspective, we believe in equal pay for equal work, absolutely. And it's something that we focus on making sure we get the person in the right job to make them successful. Sometimes we need to adjust the job to make them successful, and we do take care of that.
Thank you. And the second question, does anybody, your second question was around pay equity. Pay equity. Does anybody want to?
I mean, we're always, at a large firm, there's different groups and different bands and different levels, and we try to make it as reflective of the work put in at every level. And there's always, nowadays anyway, always studies and examinations going on at all times to make sure we don't have gender imbalance or imbalances along any diverse lines, because that's important to the firm.
Anybody else want to comment on that, or maybe we'll take another question?
Good morning, and thank you very much for those very interesting presentations. I have a question that relates to probably the most marginalized group of persons with disabilities, namely those with intellectual disabilities. Could I hear from the panelists what their experience has been recruiting and supporting people with intellectual disabilities?
Thank you. Is there anybody on the panel that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We do hire a large number of people into our operations, and there's a lot of entry-level positions where a number of people with intellectual disabilities do work in that space. One of the things that we're focusing on is the transition from high school to work. I know that was very, very difficult for Jennifer making that transition when she was that age, because there really was nowhere for her to go at the time, and it took a lot of effort. So our goal is to make sure that people have the opportunity to work on an internship while they're in high school, to understand that a career in food service or housekeeping is very viable for them in the long term, and hoping to bridge that gap between the high school and the working world.
If I could just comment quickly on that as well, Vincent's comments, is I think it's critical that path begins while they're in school, and that's where they can work through any difficulties or struggles to get to the point so that when they're leaving that school environment, they are work ready. And I mean, we do the exact same thing. I mean, that program starts you know, we have kids as young as 9 that are in this, or not 9 years old, grade 9, and child labor. But literally, you know, that grade 9 is kind of the point where they're starting to form some opinions of really, you know, what they want to be in life, right? And what their interests are. And that's the discussion I always have with them, is not, here's the job you're going to do for us. Tell me about your dream job at Giant Tiger. What does it look like? What do you do all day? Where do you go? What are the things that you're passionate about? Because I can stuff you in any box, but if I put you in the one you're passionate about, you're gonna flourish. So I think that's important.
Excellent. Thank you. Kathy,
Okay.
we have one more?
Question?
Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the panelists for speaking. My name is John Waters. I'm listening to Government of Ontario. I'm happy to hear that your agencies are committed to diversity, inclusion, and accommodation. The question I have is that sometimes, even with the best intentions, things do not work out with the first plan on accommodation. And especially for a new hire, if it's not working out, they may feel vulnerable speaking out because for fear of retaliation, real or perceived. And so can you tell me a bit about within your agencies, if the initial accommodation is not working out, how they may speak up to have the accommodation changed, and also how do you prevent retaliation? Because I think that's definitely a concern, especially for new hires who are just starting the workforce. I know for myself, when I started with the OPS, that was a concern of mine, and I just wanted to have that discussion.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So if an accommodation doesn't work out,
I'll start with my team. Our perspective is that the accommodation isn't a destination. Accommodation isn't a destination, it's a journey. So the idea is that the accommodation is a journey, it's part of a conversation, and you're constantly tweaking and revisiting and redesigning and making sure that the needs are being met, and you check in, like my team is responsible for checking in with the individual, checking in with the manager to say, how are things working out? Is it working? And just kind of being persistent about getting that feedback in order to keep that channel of communication open. Otherwise, the person in the accommodation might feel vulnerable and not have the opportunity to say what they're really thinking. So what we do is we don't wait for them to say something, we ask them. And that's the slight difference that I think is critical.
Jamie?
So I'll put it into a different context. At Dolphin, every employee is worked with continually, but there are periods of time that go by where then you check in with every employee, and one of the questions that you ask are, how are the tools that we've provided you working? We've noticed that sometimes there's a lag, let's say, in the software. Let's talk about that a little bit. We've noticed that you are fantastic when you work 25 hours a week. When you work 25 to 36 hours, we're starting to see that seems to be stressful. Is that true? Is that stressful? It's a conversation with every employee. Therefore, no employee is singled out. And I challenge you to start thinking about this as being the way we treat all, instead of just those that have a checkbox beside them that say they have an accommodation or an adjustment. If we do have a conversation with all of our employees because we are invested in them, because they are invested in us, then this becomes the norm. We have had employees where they've requested something, we have facilitated that request, and we have noticed that they were, the right word would be wanting to overachieve. And a natural conversation that happens often does not make that stand out. What stands out is when suddenly you're uncomfortable and you're not sure how to approach someone and you've never talked to them or dealt with them before, and suddenly you have to ask them if this tool is working for them. I suggest that we have this sort, and that speaks to the health and wellness of the culture of the company.
Thank you. We have another question?
Hi, sir. I was sort of waiting for this question. A lot of the other questions that I wanted to ask have already been asked. But one thing that sort of hasn't been looked at is the new wave of technologies that are sweeping through the country. And some people see these as positive things in terms of creating new opportunities and creating ability and capacity. But on the other side, people are seeing these as a way by which capital is being substituted and machines are being substituted for jobs. What's your experience in terms of your job market, your workforce in terms of the effects of technology for either including or excluding persons with disabilities?
You mean technology such as AI, that kind of thing?
Well, there are all sorts of things. AI is one thing, new capital, new machinery. We can see, new ways of creating energy. There's all sorts of things out there. It's your experiences that I'm interested in hearing about.
Does anybody want to speak with that?
Since this is why I'm a geek, I love technology, so our experience has been very positive. So Dolphin set out to demonstrate that technology helps to create a level playing field. I've heard many, many instances where people feel that technology is the barrier. The first person that we hired at Dolphin was an individual who, I will recognize his memory. Peter's no longer with us, unfortunately, because I feel that we reached him too late in life, and his diminished capacity in health was largely due to what I believe was no investment in his capabilities. His ability and his incredible intelligence was never nurtured, and I honestly believe that contributed to his failing health. Technology facilitated a demonstration where this individual, this beautiful mind, came to life and was proven. And in that moment where people saw it, I will never forget. And that is what drives us the most, is that we don't know what's possible. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of broken parts. But the beauty in that moment where we can make it work with someone and see the value of figuring it out to nurture that being that's inside all of us, I will fight for that every day.
Thank you. So we have one last question, and then we're going to tie up our panel. Not really. We're going to finish our panel. We're going to actually let you go. Please.
Allô. Mon nom est Richard Hudon. Ça s'appelle H-U-D-O-N. It's not Hudson. It's Hudon. Je vous remercie, les membres du panel, pour m'avoir conscientisé quelque peu avec votre effort pour établir ou doter vos compagnies d'un programme pour l'intégration de personnes dites handicapées. Vous avez devant vous la personne avec le plus de seniorité à titre de travailleur accidenté de l'Ontario. J'ai perdu ma jambe gauche à l'âge de 17 ans. Cette année, ça va faire 57 ans. Il n'existait pas de programme d'intégration pour handicapés le 57 ans passés. Ça fait que je vous parle un peu de mon expérience, aussi pour profiter de vos efforts de doter vos compagnies d'un programme pour l'intégration dans vos industries d'handicapés. Les handicapés, voyez, moi, je suis devenu à la fois handicapé à cause d'un accident de travail. Vous devez, en tant que industrie, voir à l'intégration des travailleurs qui sont accidentés du travail. Présentement, je crois que le défi pour en arriver avec une politique qui inclut tous les handicapés, on doit s'assurer que la collaboration, non seulement avec les agences fédérales qui veulent se doter de ce fameux plan d'intégration, aussi avec les 12 entités provinciales qui sont les commissions de sécurité de santé au travail. Quelles sont vos expériences à vous? Est-ce que vous faites la différence quand c'est avoir la réintégration d'un accidenté du travail comme moi, ou tout simplement une personne qui est handicapée pour toute autre raison qui n'a aucun lien avec un accident du travail. Moi, là, personnellement, je porte les deux définitions. Vous avez vu ma jambe? Ici, là, je viens juste de la recevoir. Elle a coûté aux payeurs de taxes 65 000 $. Mais de toute ma vie, avec la compensation de l'Ontario, je n'ai jamais eu à me battre pour obtenir une prothèse. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est visuel. OK? Mais là, depuis qu'ils sont devenus un peu plus orientés vers une compagnie d'assurance privée, ils m'ont refusé sous le prétexte que j'étais trop vieux. OK? Pas rien que ça. C'est que, étant une compagnie d'assurance, ils ont les statistiques sur les choses de mortalité et ça. Ils me disent de façon voilée que j'ai 73 ans. OK? My death date is 77, statistic-wise. So they don't want to invest $65,000, okay, because it's too much money just for 3 or 4 years. The other thing, personally, is that I suffered a bike accident, which, under your programs and your companies, I would not be an injured worker, I would be an handicap. This here is my Russian electrical arm. Simile skin and everything. You might not believe me, but I've become a recumbent trike rider. And the Ontario Injured Workers Movement have created an annual bike ride, which I'm one of the riders. When I get to a red light and I want to make a left turn, look. Look.
Wow.
It has nothing to do with my injury as an injured worker. But if I walk, and I trip and I fall, and I don't have any way of breaking the fall, who do I go to? I'm retired, and I don't have a personal insurance plans that would cover for x-rays and things like that. What I would like in terminating is, could you tell us what hardship as employers have you had, say, with implementing a program in your businesses, like the example that you said, and then secondly, as how you go about to deal with the accommodation of injured workers in your businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. You had a lot to say, and I appreciate everything, all of your comments and your journey and sharing your journey. Thank you very much. I think that if anybody wants to talk briefly about anything additional around accommodation that you've not touched on within your workplaces, you can feel free to do so. I think that we have talked quite a bit about accommodations and adjustments for both people with an acquired injury, also with people who come to the workforce with a disability. But if there's anything else that you wanted to add to adjustments or accommodations?
I think my only statement is, and I appreciate, I understood what you were saying in your story, and the ability to share that is truly appreciate it from my perspective, because that's your story and that's what's made you who you are. And my story is different, and her story and his story is different, and all of us with our stories brings us to this point. First and foremost, I believe it's about respect, and I am truly sorry that you have not received the respect that you deserve from the work that you've done. And that's where change will happen, is when we realize the value of an individual's giving in work. It's not just an effort, it's not just something we get paid for, it's actually giving of ourselves. So I do believe that when we start talking as openly as you just did, that will begin to change.
Thank you. And with that, I think we are going to wrap up our first panel. I want to thank you all very, very much. You've made me extremely proud, and you've made me look really good.